This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. Before we get started with this video, I need to verbally state this. This video contains speech protected under the U.S. Constitution. I declare I am exercising my First Amendment under the U.S. Bill of Rights. Any attempt to censor and/or suppress could be in violation of the law. Section 230 may not be applicable if found exercising bad faith regarding bias content moderation. The topics today will be covering sensitive subjects that I'm sure certain people in certain governments do not want any of us talking about. And for the record, I am not suicidal. It's really sad that we've gotten to this place that we have to do this now. But in any case, let's begin. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. This is going to be focused on Duchess of Narsussex's video that she dropped yesterday. There were a lot of questions that Duchess of Narsussex was asking in this video, started to cause light bulbs to go off in my head. So what we're going to do is similar to what a reaction video is, like going through it only halfway and answer some of those questions. Well, not so much answer it, but give some thoughts and perspectives that I don't think anyone had thought about before. In this video, Duchess of Narsussex takes us back in time to June of 2022.
Do you guys remember and this is the international incident that Harry caused a few years ago from the Mirror. Ukrainian paramedic who used body camera to film war for prick Harry, Netflix film freed. Well, he sent in this paramedic, if you can recall, to get some microfilm and some pictures and whatnot inside of Russia, and she's Ukrainian, and to bring them out. Now, the story at the time was Harry was doing this for his Netflix documentary. Well, did anybody ever end up seeing this story in any Netflix documentary that Harry and Meghan have done?
So let's pause here. The answer to this question is yes, it did show up in Prince Harry's Heart of Invictus. Okay, one small correction here is that she was actually in Mariupol, which is a strategic port city in southeastern Ukraine. And it was actually undersea, in which that's when or where Russia had invaded on February 24th, 2022.
This caused a major international incident. And now Harry is actually, like this part, the Africa, and what I'm going to go over about the United States Air Force, Harry is a danger to the entire world and a menace to the entire world.
I would have to agree with this sentiment. Just because he's stupid doesn't mean that he's not dangerous. In fact, both of them are dangerous. You have Meghan, who is Harry's handler, and Harry is the enabler.
A heroic Ukrainian paramedic who was captured while filming for a Prince Harry produced film for Netflix has been freed. Yulia Piveska, 53, known as Tyra, famously smuggled out the footage on a data card that was hidden in a tampon. Now, what's odd about this is, and I guess, journalists, news outlets or, other people will send people into war zones to get footage and everything. The problem with prick Harry doing this is prick Harry. And the political aspect and damage that this could have probably caused, but we don't know about, is immense because he is prick Harry, and this did cause an international incident. And I cannot see Netflix backing Prince Harry being involved and sending a woman in to get film deep inside of Russia during the war. Not Harry. Netflix isn't going to do that. The liability for that is insane.
Now, again, she wasn't in Russia and she wasn't sent into Russia, but she was sent on the front line. So that's about as close as you can get to Russia. So I agree with Duchess of Narsussex. Why would Netflix allow something like this to be printed? Netflix never spoke out about this situation, but here you have Prince Harry, who's producing a film under Archewell for Netflix. So at the end of the day, it's Netflix who's on the hook for this. So the first red flag that we have to look at is who is reporting this story. As you can see, it's the Mirror. It's the Mirror that put this out, followed by CBS News, CBC News. We had the BBC also reporting on it. All Sussex mainstream media friendly outlets that all have a history of pushing Meghan and Harry's propaganda. So please just keep that detail in the back of your head.
Vladimir Putin's henchmen are furious she was let go, as it appears that they were unaware of a swap organized by associates of Chechnyan warlord Ramzan Kadyrov.
Red flag number 2. Vladimir Putin's henchmen are furious she was let go as they did not know. Sure.
Now, and I think so he was released. I think there were other prisoners released. So not only did Harry send a woman in here just by herself, Harry caused a reason for whomever, I guess Ukraine, to have to give back prisoners to Russia because of what Harry did.
Red flag number 3. Nobody knows who was swapped to get this woman back.
And I don't know who Harry's working for or what he's doing or what information he was trying to get, etc., etc. But this is not good. This has caused a lot of problems. And I'm sure behind closed doors, there, as mentioned, there's a lot more problems going on than just what we know about. But again, whoever had to give up prisoners back to get this woman out, which would have never happened if Harry didn't do that.
So now my question to Duchess of Narsussex is, did Prince Harry really cause a lot of trouble? Or was he going along with the plan? Keep in mind, Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries next to Nigeria. They honestly can't say that they're fighting for democracy when they have a dictator in place who won't allow elections. We would be so dumb to think that Ukraine was not pushing out propaganda and it's only Russia who does it. I mean, look at all these covers Zelensky's across in the interviews that this guy has given to CNN, to 60 Minutes. I mean, he even had time to do a photo shoot for Vogue. All these outlets, same outlets that Meghan and Harry have used to push their propaganda and lies. And what are these interviews always about in the end? Begging for more money from the United States.
President Vladimir Zelensky has hailed Tara's release as it appears she was swapped for the son of a close crony of Kadyrov's, plus an alleged payment of £360. Adam Sadayev Gritsenko, 20, was returned to Chechnya after being held in Ukraine and going on TV to denounce Kadyrov.
Red flag number 4, Russian outlets coming back refuting that there was an exchange of this guy Sadov's son. In fact, the only place where it's mentioned is in the Mirror. Red flag number 5. Notice it says plus an alleged payment of £360,000. Alleged, meaning it's not certain.
As cruel and useless. So now, not only did Harry have to, cause prisoners to be swapped, and again, I believe there are others, and I will get to that, but this is the one they're mentioning. I actually think there were 7 prisoners that, whatever side Harry's on or our side, whatever, 7 to go back to Russia for this one woman. Now, in addition to that, there was a payment made of £360,000, which is probably roughly around $500,000. Now, do you think Harry reached into his own pocket to pay that? No. Do you think Vladimir Zelensky reached into his own pocket to pay that? No. Do you think the Ukraine military reached into their own pockets to pay that? No. The American and the British taxpayers, one of them or both of them, paid to get this woman out.
Money definitely exchanged hands, but the question is, into whose hands?
Now, whether Ukraine may have paid it themselves, but the United Kingdom and the United States are paying, or supporting Ukraine. So, way to go, Harry. She had filmed the siege of Mariupol using a body camera that Netflix gave her for a film produced by Prince Harry. Well, I don't believe that now. I don't believe Netflix would have greenlighted this. And Harry's obviously involved. And the reason now, not only for the liability, and the international incident, possibility of that, I'm sure they have lawyers, he's sending in a woman to do this. Under the guise of Netflix, that never happened. What's on this film? What's doing that? They got the film. I'm sure this woman didn't see a dime of it, but guess who probably did?
Duchess of Narsussex is right. Netflix would have never have greenlit this if It really happened. Last year, when Heart of Invictus came out, I did a review on the series, and one of the points that I raised was, why is it there was so much focus on Ukraine? How did Harry end up being the one who got the story with this paramedic who got captured? Now, at the time that I was doing this video, I didn't find that it was coincidental that this is the one person who gets captured and put on a global stage over it, where Zelensky steps up and speaks out about it, and Harry just so happens to be the one to get the scoop on it. I felt there was always something fishy here, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And then when I looked into who else was working with Archewell to produce this and put this out, this is what I said in my video. Overall, my impression after watching these 5 episodes is that this was never about the veterans. In my opinion, this was about supporting this proxy conflict that we have in the Ukraine area. The fact that the media is only talking about the lies Harry told and not the stories of these veterans, I think is the best thing to happen out of this series. In actuality, this was war propaganda. Now, please don't switch off yet. Hear me out. Let me show you what I have found. We all know that the UK and the US have been in tight alignment in supporting this effort by giving away billions of dollars in this effort to protect what they are defining today as so-called democracy against the perceived threat of Putin. We've also seen with our own eyes how Harry and Meghan have weaponized and used the media and to their own sloppiness expose how the media pushes certain narratives and propaganda onto the people in order to influence them and push them into believing certain things. Before Harry and Meghan, I knew nothing about the media and how it worked, and I equally was brainwashed into thinking certain ways and seeing things differently because of how saturated the media is and how biased it is in pushing this kind of propaganda. So how do I know that this series was meant to be seen as political? Well, you just have to look at the people that worked on it and the people that surrounded Harry during this time when he was creating this series. When we look at the 2 people who are actually behind this production, Joanna Natasagara and Orlando von Eisendale, they run a film company out of the UK called Violet Films. And what is their specialty? Running some of the most impactful film outreach campaigns. And that is a very delicate way of saying pushing propaganda. Look, whether or not you want to acknowledge it, but it's becoming clear and present on a daily basis that perception management has long been a facet of the dominant minority, which is this so-called deep state that does exist. It controls the military, political, financial, and industrial sectors of life in the Western world, and you cannot deny it any further because we are seeing it happen in front of our eyes. Perception management is not only undertaken by political discourse in the political realm, but even more so by the media that is supposed to be tasked with presenting the public with factual information. More and more of us are waking up to the fact that we are being manipulated, especially here in the United States, and that the media is really operating as a propaganda arm for the deep state, which is the current situation that we have going on here. Of that being this proxy conflict in the Ukraine area. What was up front and in front of your face with the Heart of Invictus was the conflict in the Ukraine area. And to me, that signaled, one, that this is about pushing the war efforts that are happening. And while they had other storylines that were going on, there was a core focus specifically on the Ukraine team. And how convenient that this team's country ended up going to war, and the one person that they picked to follow and give a camera to document a lot of this stuff ended up being captured. And then subsequently afterwards, then released by Zelensky, who then went on camera to let the whole world know that this POW now has been freed. And Harry was the one who captured all of that on camera and was able to talk to this woman. I don't know. That seems a little sus, especially since we've seen how manipulative Harry has been, as well as what these leaders have been doing in communicating to the people as to what has been really going on. Quite frankly, I don't personally believe it, but, strategically throughout this series, they focus on certain words and tie it to the Ukrainian team. Right here, after the word heart, they have a long pause on the head of the Ukrainian team. They do this throughout the series, but most poignantly at the very end, leaving the last thing you remember is of Ukraine.
Оце, я думаю, є інвіктус, непереможний.
And fully knowing that Violet Films participates in these kinds of emotionally charged promotional movies, like this one, the White Helmets, supporting NATO's influence and coalition narrative of demonizing the Syrian government during the time when we had this situation in Syria. Please understand that this film was part of this Syria campaign that was funded by an oil magnate that sought to gain by the fall of the Syrian government. I mean, we're all witnessing how Ukraine is being destroyed, and now we have private companies going in to rebuild the country in the way that they want it, with their central banking system, private corporations going in for development of new cities. It's almost as if it's another land grab. Now, going back to the heart of Invictus, they focused on 6 veteran stories. They had the US, the UK, South Korea, Canada, Denmark, and then there was Ukraine.
This is the first thing for you. And all these features that kind of showing what is going on now.
On the Ukraine team, for what's been weighing on me, certainly for the last.
And all throughout this entire series, you're just seeing the word Ukraine splashed everywhere. In clear view, you see it in front of you here.
Last 24 hours is the reality of their situation, not just them coming here and literally being able to see it in their eyes, the trauma and what they've had to experience with their country being invaded.
As you can see, Beth is just hanging out in the background right there. And she is like that throughout this entire series, which is kind of funny because she gets more FaceTime than Megsy. I don't know, guys. Looks like she is with Harry wherever he goes. Anyhow, back to the subliminal subtle references to Ukraine outside of the story about the Ukraine team. They show a quick clip of this guy standing at the podium speaking about Ukraine from the Ukraine team. Meanwhile, we have Pete Buttigieg sitting in the front row representing the United States from the White House. As you can see there, Beth Hurley's in the background. We also then have Brown Noser and Suck Up James Holt speaking with the team, talking about Ukraine with Miranda Barbeau sitting right next to him.
Probably the first and only real time that you'll have opportunity to meet some of the Ukrainian team.
With all the craziness that's happening in the world, what's happening in Ukraine, to be here now.
Look, Harry could have said that equally too about the Afghanistan team who was there as well. I mean, with all that they went through a few months prior, let's not forget that Harry served in Afghanistan. Before I looked up Violet Films, this felt so in my face. So Vanessa Beeley, who is a well-known UK activist and blogger, writes about the Doc Society and the Threshold Foundation, stating that Joanna Nata-Segara and Orlando Eisendel of Violet Films and Grain Media respectively have collaborated on a number of projects, most notably in 2014 on Virunga, based in the Congo, and then in 2016 when they directed and produced the Netflix White Helmets documentary. In reality, this is what she's saying, they sat on the Turkish side of the border with Syria and had the footage supplied to them by the White Helmets with no verification process to ascertain the authenticity or context of the material they converted into the so-called Oscar-winning promotional feature film. Red flag number 6 is Netflix knowing about using Violet Films, who is known for pushing these impact narratives specifically around wars. What this company did with Syria and getting footage and materials sound very similar to how this footage made its way into the mainstream as well as onto the big screen with Netflix.
Soon afterwards, she was paraded on Russian television Russian television in handcuffs with a bruised face. Now, while I think it's bad that she has bruises on her face, what did these people think was going to happen? Somebody going in from the Ukraine, microfilm and everything like that. What do you think's going to happen in Russia if you're going to be caught with that?
Exactly. Red flag number 7. The photos that the Mirror had put in their article are not the screenshots from the actual propaganda that they claim Russia had done. Now, I find it truly strange that the only place that I can find the actual evidence of this video is in the Netflix and Heart of Invictus. And they have listed that it was 3 weeks after Tiara was captured that she appeared in this propaganda video. But earlier news sources say that she showed up in this propaganda video 12 days after she was captured. So what's the truth here? In any case, here's what some of it looked like from the Netflix Heart of Invictus.
Юлия Паевская, позывной Тайра, женщина по прозвищу Зверь. Пришло время сорвать с нее маску и прямо спросить, чем она занималась в рядах карателей на самом деле.
She's lucky that's all that happened to her. She had been a star athlete who took part in archery and swimming in the Invictus Games for Ukraine, the international sporting competition for wounded soldiers created by the British Royal. So he's using vulnerable. Why wouldn't Ukraine send in one of their own soldiers or one of their own special forces or a professional to do this? This woman's a paramedic.
Perhaps maybe she was casted for this. As an FYI, she was already known in Ukraine by Zelensky, so it wasn't like she was some random paramedic that was picked to go off and do this with Netflix.
From what we understand, she passed the harrowing war footage concealed in a tampon to an Associated Press team, the last international journalists in the city. Well, I thought it was Netflix footage.
Red flag number 8. Yes, inconsistencies here. In Heart of Invictus, they make it a point to flash up on the screen saying that Tiara is volunteering at a hospital near the Ukrainian front line. She wears a camera to document her work. So initially, it was Associated Press who was the one to release this footage. Apparently, it was given to them by a police officer on March 15th. This article that was published with this footage exposing what she went through was released in May of 2022. So why did it take so long for Associated Press to release it? That's red flag number 8. Also, let me remind you that the Associated Press didn't kill any type of photos for the Harkles, but they went after Catherine's photo.
They passed through 15 checkpoints before successfully smuggling it out. Her husband, Vadim Puzanov, hid out at Russian propaganda after she was captured. Well, what did they think was going to happen?
Now, my opinion, and my opinion only, I think that they were projecting and were throwing the scent off by saying, no, this is Russian propaganda, like what they do with everything.
So then you have an international incident, payments, and they're using it as propaganda against us, all because of Harry and whatever he was doing for whomever.
No, Harry was doing what he was supposed to do. I believe that this propaganda is really propaganda that they created to make us believe and think that this woman was captured. Now, hear me out. Stick with me on this as we continue this video. You'll understand why in a second.
So Harry's made a fool out of everybody when he's the fool. Ukrainian medic films Mariupol horrors using camera gifted by Harry. I read over that. Again, I don't know what they thought was going to happen to this woman. They had to have known that there was going to be a risk of capture.
Unless it never happened. Why would Netflix take on the liability by putting this woman in harm's way? They wouldn't. Red flag number 9. This micro SD card that was smuggled through a tampon was a 256 gigabyte card, which means that it could hold up to 8 hours of video. So what we have seen exposed by the Associated Press was the same footage that was used in Heart of Invictus, which was literally less than 5 minutes. So my question is, what else was on that SD card? Unless there was nothing else on it, and this was all staged. And I'm just raising that so people can just explore the possibilities that, yeah, we were hoodwinked.
But Harry, do it for Invictus. A celebrated Ukrainian medic filmed horrific scenes from the siege of Mariupol on a body camera she received from Netflix for a film produced by Precari. Well, this woman needs to sue Netflix. Yulia Piveska, 53, who goes by the name of Tara, was able to smuggle 256 gigabytes of footage to journalists the day before she was captured by Putin's soldiers and paraded on television.
Red flag number 10, how convenient that she managed to get 256 gigabytes, almost 8 hours worth of footage, but we, the public, only got to see under 5 minutes of what was on there. And it just so happened the same footage made it to Netflix, and it was able to get out the day before she got captured, just in time.
Invictus said she was a military medic from 2018 to 2020 and helped train Ukraine's volunteer medic force. Well, okay, good. She's a medic. What's she doing in there on this mission? She was given the body. She was probably one of the only one that would go. I mean, that's like almost a suicide, unalive themselves mission. She was given the body camera last year to film for Netflix documentary series, being produced by Precari about inspirational figures. So Harry lied to Netflix, saying, it's about inspirational figures, but they've put her in there to film this war footage.
Again, I raised the point. She was given this body camera as of 2021, but we only got less than 5 minutes of footage. Something's not right. Netflix had people out there with her. So what other body cam footage was she supposed to be taking? If they gave this to her in 2021, why is it that we only see the footage from her right before she was so-called captured?
On March 15th, and look at this war zone she's in. On March 15th, the police officer handed the small data card to a team of Associated Press journalists, not Netflix. Tyra asked the journalists over a walkie-talkie to get the card safely out. Russia says more than 1,700 Ukrainian fighters who were holed up at a steel mill surrendered this week, while Ukrainian officials said that the fighters came out after accomplishing their mission. Ukraine's government said it tried to add Tyra's name to the prisoner exchange weeks ago. Yet Russia has denied holding her, even though she has appeared on television.
Red flag number 11, Russia's denying it, and they didn't make a big deal about it. You would think if this was a real prisoner swap, we would know a little bit more about Russia's demands. Russia would have been a little bit more vocal.
Video she took from February 6th to March 10th provides an intimate record of a city under siege. On anyway. So there's other Ukrainian soldiers that needed to come out, but this person gets priority treatment.
Red flag number 12, that was self-explanatory.
Vladimir Putin's not going to do anything for nothing. It was not immediately clear whether Pievska's release was part of a prisoner exchange with Russia.
Red flag number 13, they didn't know whether her release was part of a prisoner swap? All of a sudden now they have no idea how she got free?
In a rare public criticism by a Russian state media journalist, the Channel 1 war correspondent Irina Kuzkanova said it was a murky scheme involving the son of a Chechnyan official who was earlier kidnapped by Ukraine. There was no trade. There was a murky scheme through which Tyra ended up in Ukraine, Koskanova wrote.
Sources are saying that this was a murky scheme, and neither Russia or Ukraine have commented on the details of her release. Like, nobody has details on what went down?
Precari reached out to Ukrainian medic captured by Russians. Harry's not going to go in there.
Of course, Town and Country now is going to chime in and say that Harry reached out because they push Harkles propaganda. Why didn't this happen in March when this originally happened? Because this was part of the staged plan, in my humble opinion.
Tyra Paskava, a member of Team Ukraine for the Invictus game, said Precari inspired her to continue the fight.
In my opinion, that was all scripted and part of the narrative. They wanted to make Harry look like the hero.
And what's he doing? Nothing, just collecting a check. In June, Pavlovska was released by the Russians and credits the media attention during the Invictus Games with helping to save her life. So she's grateful to prick Harry for getting her out when Harry did nothing to get her out except maybe talk about it.
Like, they really pushed hard to make it look like the attention that Invictus gave her put pressure on Russia to release her. Yeah, sure, Jan. You think Putin really gives a shit about Invictus? I don't think so. Who is the one that would actually benefit from all this attention focused on Ukraine war and what happened to Yulia? That would be Zelensky. Am I right? And who else would benefit from the exposure this was bringing by Invictus? That would be their sponsor, BlackRock. Isn't BlackRock the one who wants to demolish all of Ukraine in order to rebuild back better? Yeah.
Harry didn't cut a check, Harry couldn't release prisoners, and all the other things that happened. This kid is dangerous.
He's dangerous because he's so stupid and being used like a useful idiot.
Harry's not smart enough to come up with something like that. He's just orchestrating it. And again, there's probably a big payoff here.
Of course there is. Why else would Harry and Meghan be involved?
Ukrainian paramedic expresses gratitude for Prick Harry for spreading word to the whole world. I'm sure King Charles or the UK government also had to give some things up. And Ukraine, I don't know if the United States did or not, but I'm sure that Putin made a call to King Charles, and it probably wasn't a nice call. Because if I was Putin, that's what I would do.
Now, with all these red flags, I don't think Putin called King Charles because it never happened. And that's my opinion. And I think the reason why nothing happened to Harry, even though this was on a global stage, is because all the globalists are behind this war. So if, indeed, let's say this never happened and this was to project why we need to be sending more money, I think that just served the purpose. As long as it's contributing to the cause, whatever that cause may be, to steal taxpayer money, that's what it is. And I think that King Charles didn't see an alarm. Otherwise, he would have done something, just like what he did with Nigeria in possibly calling or telling the government that, no, they have nothing to do with that Nigeria tour.
Because this is an international incident. Whether the British family has anything to do with Harry or not, he still is who he is. It's an international incident. Foreign relations, he can't be doing this stuff.
And I agree, but it doesn't mean that it's going to stop because he's working with these people. And we're talking about our U.S. government, NATO. We know that the royal family supports Ukraine.
Yeah, so belief that the awareness raised by the games contributed to the decision by Russian forces. Now, does Vladimir Putin strike you as somebody that's just going to give in to, world media and just say, okay, I give up. Okay, well, I'm going to let her go? No.
Red flag. And I lost count, whatever number that is.
Again, if I were Putin and he's, much more experienced, I wouldn't let her go that easily, and I certainly wouldn't be buckling under the pressure from some idiot.
When you break it down this way, you can see how this possibly was a scam. And it was propaganda to fool the world. The question is, why? Well, I'll tell you why. So, I don't know if many people know, but this woman, Yulia, now all of a sudden shows up in September of 2022 to testify before the Senate, talking about her experience being held captive. Now, why would the Senate ask her to be there? What was going on at that time? It was to get funding approved. You see, Zelensky needed more billions to be sent. And guess who was there to beg and tell the world how terrible her time in captivity was? And that's why we need to give this money.
Authorities of the so-called republics to avoid retribution. But everyone knows that nothing is done in the occupied territories without order from Moscow, and the handlers from the special service of Russia stand behind each of them. The world needs to insist the facilitating the access of the United Nations and the Red Cross mission to our prisoners, both military and civilian, because none of the humanitarian mission have access to our people who are illegally held in human conditions. The world needs to insist on the participation of the international community and officials in negotiation regarding prisoners, exchange and release. This is currently our main issue, and I'm asking for help in this. But the next ones will appear. The fight against the propaganda of Russian facts, fascist regime, because this is their primary weapon. A fair trial of the war criminals with objective investigation, treatment and psychical support of war victims. We must change the main Moscow narratives because they will deny the people of the whole world the right of life, no more and no less. Victory takes place in the hearts and the minds, which is no less important than the force of the arms. We have a lot of supports, including our biggest one, including the biggest one, the people of the United States, who are supporting our fight for survival directly, as well as thousands their representatives in both of chambers of the United States Congress. Using this opportunity, I would like to thank all of you for your strong voice of support in providing historic amounts of security assistance and appropriation bills. Please continue it. Support new supplement budget of 1.7 billion of United States is more or more. Designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. Recognize this aggression as a genocide. Help us to save Ukraine, Europe, and all democratic world. Thank you.
So the question becomes, hypothetically, if this was entirely staged, what would Netflix have to gain for it? Well, I think working with the Harkles, they need to get their money back somehow. But how did this come about and why did they agree to do it? Well, I think part of the reason why Netflix agreed to go along with this was because of Pete Buttigieg. If you don't know, he also had a documentary on Netflix. In any case, Netflix is a big supporter of this guy, and Pete Buttigieg just so happened to be so interested in Invictus Games in 2022. I wonder why. During the Invictus Games at The Hague, he was all about spending time with the Ukraine team and the U.S. athletes. You almost have to wonder, why are these government officials, Pete Buttigieg being the Department of Transportation, so passionate about Ukraine? It's because he is really interested in building back Ukraine better. Now you might ask, well, how does that benefit America? It doesn't. Even though they tell us it's about protecting democracy, we know it really is about lining their pockets. So Buttigieg, being the head of the Department of Transportation, wants to be able to set the policy around laying down the infrastructure. And how this money laundering scheme operates is once the American taxpayer money goes over to Ukraine then contracts out to various companies to go ahead and build whatever back, being that they're trying to flatten that whole entire region. How does that benefit the United States taxpayer? Again, it doesn't, but it does help these politicians who then go ahead and get these contracts and a little kickback, perhaps. And that's how our money is laundered and the wealth gets distributed upwards. This guy is also one of these asshole globalists who is part of the WEF and was a young world leader. This dipshit has wasted so much taxpayer money. Take, for example, using $8 billion to build 8 electric charging stations. Now, Elon Musk has built 50 of these electric charging stations because he really does want people to go to electric, and it cost him under $1 billion. I'm asking, how the fuck did this guy waste $8 billion and only have 7 or 8 of these electric charging stations to show for it? That's our money. Do I think that Netflix and all these global companies are going along with this plan to scam the American people out of their taxpayer money? Yeah, I do. And I also think that in some way, in some form, the reason why Biden administration's protecting Harry so much is because of all this nefarious stuff going on around the various causes that I've shown you that Archewell has been engaged with. It is my opinion, but Harry is the Hunter Biden of the royal family. Look, I don't know if this indeed was a scam, but from all these red flags and just putting 2 and 2 together and things just not adding up or making sense, and on top of it, I think one of the things that really makes me doubt that this actually ever happened is that they mentioned her driver also got kidnapped. See that guy in this picture? His name is Serhiy. Serhiy was only featured once and never spoken about again. So he was kidnapped. But never once did this woman ever talk about what happened to him, nor does anybody else talk about whatever happened to him. Don't you find that a little strange? And finally, the last point that I would like to make on why I believe that this never happened and this was all part of a propaganda campaign is when you go to the Archewell 2022 tax IRS return. Well, first off, the numbers really don't match what they have in their reporting, but we'll put that to the side for a second. When you look on this part with the grants that were given and the money wire that was transferred, we look at this second bullet where it says to promote the non-commercial dissemination of independent, factual, and that's it. Now, when you look at this on the surface, you have no idea what this is for or who it's going towards. But if you're like me and you read this to the very end, look what comes up at the very back. Now, back here actually explains what those 2 grants were that were listed to foreign organizations. Now, the first one is no surprise. They talk about giving a grant to research investigating the interconnected roles of social media, blah, 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 supporting the censorship industrial complex. But it's the second one that raises the final and last red flag, in which it says the grant that was written was to promote the non-commercial dissemination of independent, factual, and educational news information in Ukraine. Now, many of you know that I have gone through both impact reports for 2021 and 2022 on the year in review, and nowhere does it state any kind of work with Ukraine in this area of dissemination of information and journalistic integrity. Quite frankly, that sounds like they are funding propaganda. Now, if you made it through to the very end here, I want you to know that I really appreciate it. I know that it's a lot of information, but I felt that it was necessary to lay this all out because of how manipulative this could be if indeed this never happened. And being that Harry and Meghan are the biggest spreaders of propaganda, disinformation, misinformation, it's not a far stretch to question whether or not this situation with this woman ever happened. And in my personal opinion, I don't believe that it did. And, I thank the Duchess of Narsussex for laying out and, asking questions that I wasn't asking at that time. So, let me know your thoughts. Definitely leave them down in the comment section below. And as always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
I was such a fraud.